I am sharing my screen right now. Let me know if that's coming through. Is there a Google Hangout for this class? Very good question. There is. It's actually the generic, that makes it sound cheap. There's a animation Google Hangout that exists. I can send you guys the links. I don't have them at my ready here, but I will email them out, I guess. Let me do that. I'll email them out with this GoToTraining. I am not sure if it is the same as MCR. I don't believe so, but...
No, they told me it wasn't when I went there next month.
Okay. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it isn't, but that would... I can't 100% speak to you one way or the other. Okay, good. Thank you for that. Yeah, I do have the links. I'll send those out. Well, hey, who wants to? We're going to animate a story. How about that? Today we're going to talk a little bit about not just animating, and animating a ball and all that. We do have another couple things that I want to throw your way. Not just how to animate a ball, but actually we have our little star guy here, as well as some bricks. How do you make them blast apart like that? I might as well start with that. Let's start with the bricks. So these have their own sort of rigged up controls. You'll notice that when you hit W, there's no translation. When you hit E, there's no rotation. When you hit R, there's no scale. So what in the heck causes them to break apart like that? Well, if you look way up here, see how there's this bash channel? There's no translate or rotate or scale, but there is a bash channel. How do I get access to this bash? And what buttons do I push to make it work? It's really this simple. You can grab this. You notice that it has that bash channel. Click the actual channel itself, just the word bash. Go ahead and click that. It'll highlight. And then you can, in the viewport, that's this general area right here, if you're in the viewport and you middle mouse drag left and right, you'll actually have a preset animation that will play. And all you have to do is, you'll notice up here, when it's at 0, it's basically in neutral position. When it's at 10, it's fully blown up. So that's the transition there. And it's up to you to key that in such a way that it makes it look, like it works. So in this case, we have this one, and it's keyed at 21 and about 36, so about 15 frames there. And the bricks fly apart when the ball hits it. So that's one element to the scene. Now we're not just moving a ball around, we're actually having it interact with the scene. Speaking of interaction, we have our other friend here, the star. So let's, I'm going to switch cameras real quick. You go to panels, there's your shot cam, and then there's actually going to be a perspective, which will zoom you way, way out. Just hit F to reframe your scene. So here we have the star rig. One thing I want to draw your attention to. This character can be selected with its geometry, which is very dangerous because you'll notice very quickly that when you scale the character or move the character away from its origin, which is actually the blue curve, you're going to have some problems. So let me show you. Like if this is over here and then you decide to grab this and then rotate the star, notice that this is way off. Not good. You don't want that to happen to you. Here's what I would suggest. Up here, remember this? Deselect it. Makes it so you don't grab geometry. You don't want to grab geometry. You just want to grab the curves. So once you have the curves selected, now I can show you some cool stuff. So here we have a star, and it does have translation. It does have rotation. Star's pretty happy about it. Scale is actually locked out. One other thing that it does have, you'll notice we have translate, we have rotate, we have visibility. What do you do with visibility? Well, visibility is one of these channels that's either on or off. There's no halfway visible. It's not opacity. This is like, is it visible or is it not visible? That's basically it. Because if something is partially visible, it's just visible. Basically, you can see it or you can't see it. So this, you either can type in off or on. anytime you want it to be there or not be there. And I'll show you exactly how that works in a moment. The other channel on this rig is the squash and stretch. What does that do? Well, wait a minute. We have this guy here. Remember how this bash works? You click this and you middle mouse drag and it just kind of plays out that animation. Well, the squash and stretch is actually the same for this. So instead of having multiple channels and multiple curves, rather, on this that you can, move around to get this to squash or stretch, this one actually has just a single channel that you click, and then in the viewport you just middle mouse drag, and you can kind of stretch and squash the star as needed. Now, you'll notice here the way this works is 0 is when it's basically neutral. When it goes to 10, it's stretched. When it goes to -10, it's squashed. Now, you don't have to always go straight to the max on each of these. You can actually kind of go, well, I want maybe a little bit, maybe a 3 or something, or 7.8. But just understand that the amount that you squash it or stretch it doesn't have to always be like, is it on or off? Like, don't worry about that. You can actually do gradations of that, and that's really what we'll be getting into as well. So, if we're going to be animating this here scene, what I was thinking of doing was basically, I'm going to blow away all the keys on the star, and what we can do is a sort of choose your own adventure animation story, and kind of go through not only how to tell a story and all that, but also the process of building the pillars in your scene, the sort of extreme positions, and then bridging those as you go forward. So if you have an idea for a story, how do you actually put those things down and not be, you don't want to like take 3% of your scene, like from here to here, and go, I'm going to polish the crap out of that, and then I'll figure out whatever the rest is going to do later. You actually want to do the entire idea in a raw sense, like a really crude, like, okay, I want this to happen, then this to happen, then this to happen. Hit those main beats. Don't worry so much about like, well, this has to do all of this other stuff. Like, really hit the main positions first. Those are your waypoints, basically, to tell your story. That's probably the most important thing. And from there, you'll then layer in the other, intricacies. But you want to start very broad and then get more and more specific as you animate. The longer you stay broad and organized, the easier your animation will be to modify and change the story as you go along, because you'll come up with ideas as you go. You should be thinking about, okay, I kind of want to do this, I kind of want to do that, but go through the process and stay broad and simple as long as you can, because that will allow you to then make changes on the fly. If you're looking at, let's say, the ball here, look at how many keys are on this. This is a mess. If you're trying to tell a story and you have a lot of ideas already in there, it's going to be difficult to modify, as it turns out. So the broader you can stay as long as you can, the easier you can then say, well, maybe, what, it would be cool if the ball did this. Okay, fine. So like for the star here, let's say we're telling our story and the ball kind of hits this block. By the way, you'll notice that the question mark blocks in my scene do not say 3AM, which is this course's acronym. It says FOA. That's because they changed the acronym for this course for whatever reason. It used to be Fundamentals of Animation, and now it's 3AM, which means nothing. It used to be, I think it was 3DA, which makes sense because that's what, like, the 2D class was 2DA, and I don't know, maybe somebody else has that course acronym or something, but they couldn't do 3DA because that would have made sense. So, if you're watching this and going, how come that looks different than mine? It's just a small aesthetic thing. Don't worry about it. So let's say we're telling a story here, and I'm just going to start us off with instead of having the star pop out of this bottom one, because I don't want you to get too bogged down into like, well, this looks like the Mario Brothers kind of scene. It has to abide by the physics therein. That's not true. You can actually kind of break rules here. I want you to there are no rules, basically, other than I don't want you to make the star do one of these, or the ball. Don't have things fly around, please. There's no flying, and there's no sliding. And when I say sliding, I mean like, don't have the star here and just have it like do this, and then stop, and like do this and then stop and then do this or whatever. If it's just doing this across the ground without like jumping and hopping or rolling or something, you're not doing it right. So you can, to move any object, the ball or the star, it should either roll across the scene or it should jump or hop, that kind of a thing. So if you want the star to move around, don't just like, if it pops up, don't have it like slide like this. Have it like hop, boom, 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 something like that. Or you can even have it roll if you wanted to. Just be careful with the star because it's not a clean shape like a circle. A ball can roll across, but a star actually is going to have moments where, like if I rotate this, as you can see, when you rotate that, the foot goes below the ground. So then you have to kind of do one of these to make sure that it's not going below. So keep an eye on that sort of thing as you go. So some other stuff. I'm going to bring the star. We'll just take like, I don't know, this moment or whatever. And I will zero everything out on the star. Of course, it's going to do this craziness. Sometimes, by the way, if you're in Viewport 2.0, the star may not update. It's really annoying that it does that. It gets stuck. That's 2017. It does it as well, but mainly I've seen it in 2016. So let's say you have your star and it lives in the box, because all stars live in boxes, I guess. You'll notice that it doesn't quite fit very well, right? It's like, that's kind of, it's not very well designed. Not a big deal though. So let's say that's where we want the star to start. So a couple things that you may find useful. If you have a bunch of animation and you're like, you know what, I actually want to clear off all this stuff and I want to start from scratch, how do I do that? You have the star selected, right? And you're like, I want to delete all of the keys on the star. Here's how you do it. Double click the timeline. I'm assuming that you're zoomed out enough in your timeline that you can select all the keys when you do this. That's whenever you double click your timeline, it selects whatever you have. If you're zoomed in like this and you have keys that are maybe out there, if I double click the timeline, it's not going to select these other keys that are out here. So be careful. I'm anticipating that you have all of the keys visible on your timeline. You can go to whatever frame, let's say we were right here. So I can double click this, hit delete, and I want you to keep your eye up here. I'm going to undo it and redo it so you can see, but basically we lost all connections. So I undo it and redo it, and you can see basically that we destroyed all of the animation on that character. So by just going right there, you can just go, boop, gone, no more animation on that star. If I scrub through, hooray. That's one way of doing it, which works pretty well. There's another way that does not require even looking at any part of the timeline whatsoever. You can actually go to whatever frame you're happy with. Let's say it is 61. You can highlight all of these channels, right click, and there's actually this little guy down here called Break Connections. Now you want to think about your keys as connections. Really, they're just basically you're connecting these channels to what this character looks like, if you want to think of it in those terms. So if you break connections, you're saying, I want to clear the slate. Everything that I have selected here, all of these channels, and you can do it very specifically. You could say, I just want to delete all of the keys that are on my rotates, and you could grab these and hit break connections, and watch what happens. Boom. Now there's no input happening here. No rotations will have any movement whatsoever. If I did that here, also, this would clear off all the animation on that. Whatever the last values are, that's what it's going to have forever until we tell it to do otherwise. So what you can do is basically just grab all of these and do that. And that will clear all of the animation off of that object. So kind of a pretty simple way of deleting animation. Yeah, so there you go. You can even use it in modeling, MCR. That's fantastic. Yeah, so breaking connections is a pretty useful tool, as it turns out. So now, okay, cool. We have our scene. Ball kind of rolls in, hits this brick, nothing happens. Hits this other trigger right here, boom, hits that block. We can have this. We can basically make it so that's like a switch. Once that gets tripped, maybe we want the star to emerge. Maybe it emerges from somewhere else. Who knows? It's our world. We can build this and make it work. So what I'm going to do is go, I don't know, several frames out, and I'm going to make it so the star emerges. Hooray! Hooray, star. He's happy. Look at that. Okay, so I've got a second key, right? I've got a key right here, and I've got this other key. Now here's the thing, though. You might be looking at this going, you mentioned earlier how the star isn't sticking, it isn't inside the box. It's kind of sticking out there. I don't really like that. How do we fix it? Well, here's how you do it. Go one frame before that moment. The moment before the star appears, okay? You can go to visibility. I told you we'd talk a little bit about visibility and how this works. Notice 59 and 60. I'm just jumping between these two keys. Right now there's no difference. Go to 59. See this? 0. Enter. That turns it to off. If you hit 1, enter, that turns it on. You can also type these words in if that works for you. But if you think of it as 0 and 1, sort of a binary thing, if you hit 0 and hit enter, that's basically going to turn it off. So now, the visibility of the star, if I hit 4, it's off, 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 until it hits this point, and then guess what? The very next frame, on. And then it will be on until we tell it otherwise. So that is how you can make something appear, like a magician. So guess what? Now we have, this gets hit, star emerges, happy days are here again. Now we have a star. So what do we do with this? How do we want this to progress? So right now, the ball hits this, it sees that the star pops up, so it kind of goes, whoa, and then it kind of makes a dash to the right. So basically, to make this kind of match up, we could have the star move over to the right. But now, in doing this, I'm just going to go several frames out, and I want to kind of give you some options here. Like, with this, if the star is moving to the right, we could have it so it hits this brick thing, and like when it jumps off or bounces off of it, maybe it breaks the bricks and then lands somewhere down here. There's another, we could probably have it so it doesn't land perfectly on this. Maybe it hits just the corner of its foot, which would cause it to tumble down. Any number of things. We could have it so maybe it rolls off the FOA block here instead of maybe jumping off. There's a myriad of options. I'm sorry, I missed your question there, Danielle. Absolutely. You absolutely can animate the star as if it's a character itself. Totally. So long as you abide by the limitation that it can't fly around. Again, don't do one of these where it's like, wee, don't do that. Jump it around and roll it around just like you would the ball. So as long as it isn't doing one of these where it's sliding, don't slide it across the ground. Have it either roll or hop. It can hop around as many times as you want. Yep, as long as you stick to that, 1000% by all means. Bounce or roll. That's the way. And that's what we'll be doing here. So right now, you're going to see like with the few keys that I put down, it's going to go right through the FOA block there. No big deal. So the question mark thing, this is going to look like crap, by the way, until we start to build in the bridges, basically. Right now we're just putting in pillars. So think of it as waypoints in our story. So right now, what do you think? Do you want to see the star land on the brick and blow the brick up? Do we want it to land just offset so it kind of clips this and then falls? A or B? What do you think? A sounds cool. All right, we'll explode the bricks. So we'll have the star land pretty square. We'll have it kind of fall out, and then it's going to land on this. We'll have it kind of bounce and blow the bricks up as it jumps off. So I'm just going to key that pose. So now we're just going to hit this position. And timing-wise, don't worry too much unless there's a very specific thing that you want to have happen. So like right now, this ball is going to zip forward. It's going to basically do a burnout. And then it's going to zip forward. It has a lot of momentum here. Now, if that's the case, it's possible that maybe at 116, when the ball is right there, we could have the ball hit the star. Or we can do this. We can have it so the ball, maybe the star jumps down, and it's like right about here, at like a little earlier. So basically the star is going to hit this pose and then jump down. So right now, notice that I'm only putting the impacts, just like we did for the ball bounce last week. I just put the impacts down first, and then you worry about the arcs later, because we'll get to that. It's just a matter of, I want it to hit these positions. So if the star is here, and we kind of scrub through and see, okay, you know, do we want the star to get hit by the ball, or do we want the star to dodge the ball? What do you think? Like, should the star jump out of the way of the ball, or should the star get hit by the ball? We'll do an A-B there as well. Hit sounds more dramatic. Yeah, it's always a good idea to put your characters through hell. It makes things more interesting. That's true. So actually what we'll do is then I'm going to move this key out to about, yeah, let's put it around right about 116. So I'll place this right about there. And actually, here's the thing. Like, you can have it so it doesn't have to just land at the moment of 116. The star can land like a few frames earlier. It could land at like 113. So I could take 116, middle mouse onto 112, let's say. Okay, so maybe it lands right there and it stays, it pauses for a moment, and then it gets hit. So the star is unsuspecting, basically. You can have it so it bounces off of this, lands, waits, and then it gets hit by the ball from between there and there. Now, when it gets hit, this is a matter of, you know, what do we do with the star? Because if it gets hit, you know, we can have it so the star pops into the air. We could do something where, like, let's say right here, the star might get hit from behind and it might rotate. It might look something like this, where it gets, you know, kind of popped. Now, of course, we would hold this drawing, like basically this pose. We'd hold this until it gets hit like that. So I'm just putting waypoints in. Remember, it's all about the impacts. Put down those impacts first. Everything carries from that. So these are important story elements. So this makes contact with the star. Again, we can do any number of things with the star from here. We'll go ahead and I'll move out a few frames. Now, the ball goes through and makes its way back across. If the star gets hit up in the air, the star could be up here somewhere. It would probably be out this way because, of course, it does get hit out and up. Do we want the star to... We could have the star actually land on the ball. We could have the star, as it gets popped up in the air, it could land on the pipe. We could have it land down here and then jump onto the pipe. We could have it so the star lands in the pit. Maybe the ball hits the star pops in the air and lands in the pit. What sounds good? Should the star get back at the ball? Or should the star land in the pit after it gets hit by the ball? Or should the star land on the other side safely? Totally. Oh yeah. Yeah, if we do a sort of down spike here, where like the ball hits the star pops in the air, and then if we play this out, the ball pops up and is about there, or even there. Let's move it to about there. Like, let's say 129. We could take the star and say, okay, well, the star's going to land on the ball, and it's gonna knock the ball into the pit, so it'll bounce off of the ball right there. Now, if that's the case, think of how you animate as passing a baton from one character to the other. If you're doing multiple character scenes, you have to think about what is leading the action and what is being affected by the action. So in this case, earlier here, the star was affected by the ball, right? Ball hits the star. That means the star reacts to the ball. Now what happens here, though? Right there, the star hits the ball. That means the ball must react to what we have the star doing. Well, guess what? That means the rest of this animation that we have on the ball doesn't really play out. So if we're going to decide to do that, you want to key this pose, make sure that it does arrive there, but all this other stuff after, highlight it, delete it. And here's the thing, you can't just do that on the main control, you have to actually do that with the squash and stretch as well. As you can see, that's all still in there. So you have to grab these other two controls and go to 129, make sure you key that because you want to make sure that it's registering that pose, but all this other stuff after, just go ahead and hit delete. So now, boom, the ball is a clean slate from this moment forward. It's all up to us what we want to do. So let's say star hits the ball falls into the pit. So we can have it so the ball just knocked like straight down, and just key that. So it's going to go down like that. Now, the number of frames, I hope you understand, like, I don't know how many frames something should take. I'm just kind of putting down a bunch of, you know, frames just as a placeholder. Like a good, 8 to 12 frames, something like that, is usually a decent broad scope. If you're doing very small movements, then I usually will do like 4 frames, something like that. But again, those are placeholders. You really don't know if it's going to work or not. So I don't want you to look at this and go, well, he obviously knows what he's doing. It's like, I really have no idea. I want you to understand that as I'm doing this. Like, there are certain things obviously that make sense because it's like, well, this is impacting that, so that just has to happen at that moment. Same here. If this is where they're colliding, that has to happen at that moment. But how long is it supposed to take for any of these actions to play out? That has yet to be seen. So we have to kind of see how this is going to work. So now star hits the ball into the pit. Now what do we do with the star? Do we want the star to, jump off of the ball and land over here? Or do we want it to land here? Or do we want the star to hit the ball and pop up into the air and just fall straight back into the pit? Exactly right. Decide the action, then figure out your timing. That is exactly right. Better to do that because there's so many things that you have to think about simultaneously. Thinking about timing on top of all of that you're just gonna pull your hair out. Like you're gonna be concentrating on too many different things at the same time, and it's more important to get a good story and make sure that it's fun and interesting than to obsess like, oh, is the timing right though? It's like you're gonna get to the timing. That's fine. Like as long as the animation and the motion itself works and it's funny or it's good or you're telling an interesting story, timing is very easy to modify. Like once you have all the infrastructure there, timing is just okay. Well, how many frames should it take? I don't know. You have to figure that out. But as long as you have the good keys in there, you did the hardest part really. The timing is not difficult. So once you have these main poses, what do you guys want to see as the next? What should we do with the star? So we're knocking the ball down into the pit. We can do any number of things with the star. What do you want to see? Like the star pop up in the air and land in the pit. Should it land over here? Should it land over here? Should it land back over here? What do you think? A, B, let's say. We'll flip the coin. Land on the pipe. Go to the pipe it is. All right. So I'll go, I don't know, several frames out, something like that. Seems pretty good. Obviously, I'm going to zero out the rotation here. You can just kind of do that or eyeball it, either way. So hooray for the star, he won. Except, it lands over here, that's fine. Ball's in the pit. But, we're only at like 142 frames. Even if we go out about there, this project is supposed to be anywhere from 8 to 12 frames. Or frames, that'd be a very long project, huh? 8 to 12 seconds. Yeah, this is a bit short. Like, so what I want you to think about, if you come across this in your scene and you're like, man, I think I told my story, but it feels like it's over too quickly. How should I make this work? It's a good idea to either consider adding a pause or two. Sometimes adding a pause, you might think like, oh, well, that seems like a cop-out. Here's the weird thing. Pauses generally show that someone is thinking. Isn't that crazy? Like when you add a long pause, it makes people go, "Oh, what's going on there?" Okay, and obviously there's a you can pause too long and you lose the audience. But sometimes when you actually add pauses to your work, it allows the audience to take a breath, and it actually can make it feel like the character is thinking. When we are thinking, we generally are not simultaneously acting. So having a character pause for a moment and maybe just look, in a direction, that small bit of almost nothing can actually be huge animation-wise, like when you're telling a story. So you don't always have to feel like, oh, well, there has to be action happening at all points. Everything always has to be moving. That's not true. Animation is a lot like Music. I think I forgot who said this, so I'm just going to butcher the quote anyway. But music is not just about notes, it's about the space between the notes, the silence that exists between the music. So don't always think that animation is about always moving something. Sometimes it's about a lack of movement. It's about pausing for a moment and then acting. So in this case, maybe adding a pause might help us. In other cases, maybe you just need to add some extra actions to finish out the scene. So in this case, maybe the star lands. Oh, yeah, I think we have a suggestion here. So add a reaction like right before the ball first hits the star. Right. Yes. So like yeah. So yeah, Danielle said just for the recording here that we could add like a little stretch to the star before the ball gets the ball hits the star basically. So the star is like and then gets smashed. Those are absolutely little moments. Now, as far as timing goes, we don't have to actually add time there. We could actually steal some time and make it so the star lands a little sooner here, and then does that small reaction and then gets smashed. But here at the end, when we land, we can have the star dance. So it maybe does a little twirl or something and then goes down into the pipe. We can have it so the ball reemerges. There's nothing that says that because the ball, falls into a pit, that the ball can't reemerge through the pipe and, have its revenge on the star. Or maybe, it falls down into the pit and then pops in from screen right for some reason. We don't know. This is our scene. You can abide by your own rules. So just don't think of it like, oh, well, this is, the rules of Super Mario Brothers or something. Tell your story. This is your world. It's not it's not rigid to maybe he got a free life. Cool, boom, he pops back in, or maybe he arrives back up the pipe this way, or maybe he pops out of a question mark block. Who knows? Whatever you would want to do is as long as you can sell it, right? Like you just have to make the audience believe it, and it'll work. It really will. So with the end of this, what do you guys want to see? Do you have something that you wanted to see in your scene? Because we still have, I would say, a good 40 to 60, 80 frames even to play around with to make this still work. So we could add a few other things. You want me to show you how to make the star kind of do a little dance? How can you move the ball without Maya trying to add the in-between motion? There is a way. If you are not a fan of Maya's in-betweens, like default, like if you actually want it to just move from key to shining key, I use the greater than less than symbols to do that, which removes the in-betweens basically. But if you are animating and you're like, I just want to see the keys, I don't want to see all those in-betweens right now, there's actually a way to do it. You can go to the graph editor and all of your channels here, and I'll kind of go to just the translate Y so you can kind of see something that's familiar to you. So you have these keys. Maybe we'll go with translate Y is not too bad. So you've got like an arc right here. You can actually hit what's known as, if you look way down in the lower left, it'll tell you what it is, but this is what's known as stepped tangents. When you hit this, it makes everything look sort of, I don't know, Egyptian or something. It makes it so it's stepped. What does that mean? Well, it means that basically if I do it to all the channels, and you can just hit stepped and it'll make them all that way, you'll notice that the ball will start popping when it translates. Of course, if you do it to the squash and stretch as well, if I grab all of them and do that, now it'll feel very poppy. Now the problem with this is that it doesn't quite feel animated. people tend to use the stepped tangents for posing, and then they eventually go back to auto to finish out their scene. So with regards to this project, I would suggest not using stepped. Actually, one other note, I guess I should, because it's an important distinction. Don't make this poppy like 8-bit or like not even 8-bit. That's like Atari 2600 or something. Don't make it so the star does one of these where it like pops here and then like pop 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 and like really feels low frame rate. I ask that you don't do that, just because it actually is very difficult to pull off to make it look good, because it ends up having to be held for about 3 to 4 frames each movement. So it's basically like you're held and it goes like bark, 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 bark. It's going to be like kind of choppy. That actually takes a lot more keys, as it turns out. It's not easier to do. It's actually way more difficult to pull off to get that style right. So you want to make one crash into the other and then roll across the floor together in a scuffle. Now that's going to be a pretty involved thing to make it like feel like it's a true scuffle. But we can have it so basically like the star is here. Let's say the ball does pop back out. So we'll give the star a small break, good 12 frames or so, something like that. And here's the cool thing. Star is just chilling there. Now, if you go back to your shot cam, you'll see, especially if you hit this button right here, this is a resolution gate. It's going to show you where what exactly is off cam. So right when the ball is right there, it is no longer on camera. So when you play blast, that will not be seen. But here's the cool thing. So we know the ball is off cam at this point, but once we hit this position at 138, over a single frame, when it falls up, you can actually just do one of these and move the ball right in the pipe. So over a single frame, it goes boop, right there. Nobody needs to know. It just goes right. And when you look at this way, if it's like this, you won't be able to see it. Now, of course, we've got this extra key here, so we'll delete that. So as you can see, boom, it just pops right up into that. And now we are ready to perhaps create a scuffle. So how do we go about this? Star hits that position. We'll wait a beat or so, 8 to 12 frames, something like that. And then let's have the star get hit by the ball again. So over a single frame, by the way, you can just go like this. Maybe get it into a position that you're happy with, right underneath. We'll just kind of straighten it out. And no one can see this animation that's playing from like 139 to 152. So don't even worry about it. But now we're going to have the ball pop out, and it's going to hit the star. And it just pops out, not too high, doesn't have to go crazy. So it bursts through, and then maybe falls back down. And maybe it'll chase the star. So maybe it'll land, and we can figure out, where does the star go? So now we have the ball pop up. We have to start figuring, okay, well, where's the star going to end up here? I'll just put a key right about at 154, and we'll just tell the star. We can put it in a few different directions. If the ball pops up and hits the star and we want to actually have them chase each other, what I would probably do here, and this is, again, we're making our own rules, so because we don't have a lot of screen real estate over to the left, it would require a big jump over this thing. We could either make that big jump over to the left where the ball hits the star and the star lands on the other side and the ball chases it, or we could have it so the star lands this way and bounces off cam and then rejoins over here, and the ball chases the star off. Like, there's a lot of different story elements that you can do. Again, we're breaking rules, but there's nothing that says, as long as you can sell it and it feels right, the audience will just eat it up. It doesn't matter. So, like let's try the wraparound scene. So like if you jump off cam screen right, you rejoin us screen left. So you kind of go like boing, 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 and then out, and then boing, boing, back this way. So if we get hit right here, we'll go out, I don't know, several frames. Let's say we hit the star. We'll have it just land somewhere about there. Maybe I'll give it a few more frames. And then it will bounce off cam like that. And then that means basically just a few frames, probably no more than 2 frames later, it's going to rejoin us. So it might bounce back on screen. So basically another several frames, and the star will land right about there, let's say, on the ground. Key that. So when you look at it in the macro, it's going to kind of, it gets hit, it's going to basically fly off cam and then pop back on the other side, and we can actually add maybe another bounce. So when it lands, maybe it you know, does one of these, or it falls in and then goes boing and then lands like there. Key that. And then hey, we can add you know, some extra time here. 240 frames, by the way, is 10 seconds. So let's say we hit that. Star's going to bounce, and then the ball will then chase the star. So you hit those beats, and then you know the star lands. Then the ball goes after the star. So then basically you just put down the impacts. Maybe the star or the ball jumps over screen left, and I'm just putting the impacts. So and maybe the ball jumps up. Now there won't be bricks there, so we'll have to land it there. So it's going to hit basically from here to there to there. And then maybe we'll make it do a big leap and land on this. So we could probably even go 260 or something, just a little bit more time. And because this is going to chase the star off cam, and that could be the end of the scene. So maybe it lands just off cam like that. So you get this kind of nice, like, star will realize that the ball is chasing it, you know, once it hits probably right about there. And then, you know, it's going to jump and run away. Probably land off cam somewhere about there, maybe a few frames later. And maybe we'll have it hop. So the star will go hop there and then hop off. So there you have it. We basically have an infrastructure that we can build upon, right? Or yeah, that's true. We could have the star jump up. Like jump up and off? Or do we want them to impact each other? Because right now we're in the layout phase, and we can get into the basically the roughing in phase. This is where, like, once you get your keys down for the story beats, then it's layering in right. Oh, I mean, we can make it so they might impact once more. The thing is, we want to wrap up the scene as well. If they hit once more, we'll still have to resolve it. Like, we don't want them to just hit and then be like, "Hey man, it's cool." like visually that can be tough to work out. So either one has to win, or they both have to like hit and then both KO each other somehow if they're going to continue that fight. So like let's say the ball kind of jumps over. Um, or maybe the star gets squashed by the ball. Yeah, we can do that. So let's say, yeah, maybe the star pops back into the scene. Maybe it lands there. So like, we'll start this up a little higher, or maybe a little lower. Maybe it'll come up. We'll delete this, have it so this key basically lands about there. So it's going to pop up and land on that, and we'll just actually hold that for now. And the ball will basically jump from about here, actually about there, yeah, about here. Let's see. Actually, I don't like that. Maybe we'll have it land right here. And then it'll jump, and we can probably have it so it lands on top of the star and smashes it. Very good question, Danielle. Yeah, if like with regards to the 3-4-5 principle, um, if once you have more than 5 beats, basically you're going to want to pause. You want to chunk your scene in such a way that you don't want to overtire the audience. That's where pauses really are helpful. They're kind of a reset of the 3-4-5 principle. So if you have a character that's doing like 3 or 4 or 5 different actions, it's okay to do those things. But if you end up having 6 or 7 or 8 different actions, then exactly right. It is kind of like music. So you need a rest, and then you can continue again. So I liken it to, and in animation they'll tend to use this phrase. They'll call it phrasing, actually. If you have like 8 different movements, then you don't want your animation to play out this way, where it's like, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. If you have 8 different movements and they're all timed out that way, it's going to be monotonous and boring and basically predictable. You don't want things to feel predictable visually. So what you then want to do is, if you have 8 different motions, don't chunk them in such a way that they're all even. Instead, put some together and phrase others together. So if you can do a sort of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, then you've got some asymmetry going on with regards to the design of the movement. But you can do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. However many pauses or alterations you would want to make. There's any number of great ways to phrase your animation so that each action, each bounce or jump or whatever, each of those things is one main action. But you don't have to make it so it's like jump, 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 roll, jump, jump, roll, 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 jump. It's like if that's the way it plays out, you're just going to have a very boring animation. So it is really good to try to change it up, not just with what the character's doing, but how you phrase those movements. So thank you for bringing that up, Danielle. It's a very good point. So for something like this, if we jump and smash, this the star here, we'll probably just have it, squish it, and then we win. Star or ball wins the fight, basically. So now we have a pretty good infrastructure. Now, of course, just so you know, if the ball does make a jump and it's a little bit too far back, you may want to square that up. So we'll go ahead and do that. So back to our macro, because we need to now, we've put in a bunch of keys we're pretty happy with, but how do we then bridge the gap? Well, this is where the motion trail is kind of a helpful tool. So as we have the star emerge, you can go about halfway between any 2 keys, and the reason I say about is because it depends on where the key is, where the character is jumping from and where they're jumping to. If you're jumping from a higher location and you're jumping down, the amount of time on the way up will be less than on the way down. This is like if I jumped off of a plane, the amount of frames it would take me to jump up would be like 4, and the amount of frames it would take me to fall would be minutes worth, maybe, or 30 seconds worth or something. I don't know what it is, but it takes a while. So the number of frames on the way up here, because we're starting from something higher up, is going to be fairly low, but the amount of frames on the way down is going to be greater because there's a greater distance to travel. So keep that in mind as you design your jumps. So from the get-go, when we were bouncing a ball like last week, the number of frames on the way up and on the way down were equal because we were bouncing on an even surface. But if you're jumping down from something higher, the number of frames on the way down will be more. Now, if you're jumping from down here up onto something that's higher up, the descent will actually have less frames, not the ascent, if that makes sense. So it depends on how you're going to phrase this out. So here, the number of frames on the way up is actually going to be less. So I'm going to move this back a couple frames. Now that might not be perfect. We may have to modify that still, but I'm just kind of eyeballing and saying, yeah, it's probably going to be a little bit less frames on the way up than it is on the way down. So then we hit 95 here. Remember, this is where we wanted to blow up those bricks, so we will do that. But we're going to have the star jump. So I'll go now, and this one, again, we're jumping down from something higher up, so a little bit more frames on the way down than on the way up. Star's going to chill for a moment. I'm going to actually copy 112 and hold it till 115. And then notice, boom, then it's just going to pop up. So from 116 all the way up to 129, I don't want it to just travel straight there. So what I would suggest is go a few extra frames out. We're going to pop this up fairly high. And it's going to pop up in the air, and then it's going to fall down, boom, and smash the ball. Now, on this, here's a little trick. It's a trick of the trade. If you want something to have more impact on a sort of down spike like this, and this isn't just true for this specific movement, sometimes if you want something to really read clearly, it's a good idea to actually take a page out of 2D animation, and you can actually hold a drawing, a pose, for 2 frames, kind of like if you were shooting something on 2s. So right here, where the ball gets impacted by the star, instead of actually just having it play out for a single frame where they make contact and they both go their separate ways, here's what you can do. Grab the star and the ball. Notice we have them both on 129. I can actually middle mouse to 130 and key it, and now both of these stay in place for 1 extra frame. You might be thinking, isn't that going to look weird because it's going to freeze for a moment? Yeah, it is. That's why, to keep it alive, we're going to actually add squash and stretch. So they'll stay in that physical location, but they're going to squash more before they push apart. Exactly. Yeah, it's basically holding that moment in time where they both kind of collide and then press apart, because basically this is where the star lands on the ball gets hit by the star, and then the star is going to basically, once we hit this position and we go from 130 to 142, we jump our friend over the cloud. So we're just going to go pop up and over and down. Now, the number of frames for this, I can already tell it feels a little bit on the low side, so I'm going to actually add probably something like that. You'll feel it out. It's probably not going to be perfect. So we'll play that out. Now we have, it hits this, holds for 2 frames, then we push off, land on the pipe on the other side, then the ball ruins the star's day, and we're going to have to send the star on its way again. Probably pop it up pretty high, maybe a little bit further to the right. So it's going to go boop, and then land somewhere about here. It's probably a good idea to look at your shot cam, just to make sure if it's already off camera right there. So it looks like we kind of lose it right there. So it's going to get popped up, and then it's going to fall maybe a frame earlier, just off cam that way. Or, you know, it's possible to just send it off that way. So maybe it gets sent sideways, which actually could work, because if it has an upward trend here, we could have it pop back on over here, and just, if you can't see it, go back to your perspective cam and start it so it's basically at about the same height as it was when it left this side. So we basically want it to be about there, and then aim upward and land at 187. So what we can do is we can add more time. And just keep that upward angle. So it's basically going to come back on screen, boop, like that, and then land. Now, you might be thinking, yeah, but it goes straight across the whole, the whole scene. What are you going to do? Why is the star right there? Like, that seems crazy. Don't you worry, because actually what you can do is, when you have it go off cam over a single frame, you can actually just move it like super far below the ground. So no one will see this. It's already off cam. It goes off cam and then comes back off cam even over there. So no one will see any of this. And then the star will just play right back out. So we go back to our shot cam. You'll get that sort of a thing. So as you can see, we're building our infrastructure for the star with those arcs. Back to the ball, make sure that that's working as well. Ball pops back up and down, and then what's the next bit for the ball? We'll go ahead and take this out and then use the motion trail for the ball. So you can see here, from here to the end, there's our jump from 196 to 210. Actually, incidentally, if you're interested in like limiting the motion trail, if you use the default settings, you can actually just lower the timeline and hit the motion trail, and it'll just show you the area that you have selected on the timeline, which is kind of nice, because really all I'm concerned with is like the second half of the scene. So 196 to 210, we're jumping a little bit lower down, but not by a lot. So even still, like I can just basically jump the ball about there, maybe a little bit further over, but something like that. So we jump this leap over the pit of despair, and then jump it up onto the brick right there at 220. So that means, now remember, these bricks, and actually we could probably do it even right now, earlier in the scene, just show you when the star breaks off of the bricks. So like right here was when we push off. So the moment that we leave, I'm going to start at 95, that's the moment we leave, and then right about there, so I'm going to go out, I don't know, 15 frames or so, and crank this to 10. So now stars are going to jump off of that, and the jump will actually cause the bricks to break apart. Now, the graph editor stuff is what we'll be getting to just after what I'm laying out here. So notice that we're just putting down those keys for the ball and the star just to make sure that our jumps are where we want them to be. So right here, of course, we're jumping from 210 to 220. I'm going to bring that up a little bit higher so it kind of jumps up onto the bricks there. And then we're making a pretty low-grade leap here onto the star. So right here, we can kind of do something like that. So we go boing and then land right on that. Now, with 220 to 224 to 230, it is possible to make some extra texture with our jump here. So it's possible to actually have it so we do one of these, and I could actually add 2 mini jumps. This adds a sort of staccato, another musical term, sort of staccato, jumbled up micro hop. So what you can do is let's say you land at 220, and then by 224, instead of the ball being way up there, I'll actually have it so it lands here. And then basically between these two, I'm just going to do a very small hop. And it's basically just going to land, and then do a bigger jump. So it's like two short hops. Give it some more, you know, instead of keeping all the hops as like kind of medium, large hops, two very small ones, boom, boom, and then jump. And then the ball wins. Hooray! So, we've laid all that out, got all that stuff in there. Now, let's dive into the graph editor stuff. Yes, that's right. We got to get to that. So let me zoom back out here. We'll get back to the star. And we'll use the motion trail so we can see what's going on. Now, so we have the star. Star emerges. That's a pretty good idea for a motion trail fix. If you remember what we did last week with the translate Y's, do you remember how we basically sharpened impact tangents? Because we wanted the spacing to be a certain way, right? We wanted the spacing to feel like it had more impact at the moments of impact, basically. So when you leap, that is to say when you jump or hop, the moment you leave the ground is actually a sharp tangent. This is basically because you are pushing off the ground with explosive energy. You are leaping. And the moment you leave the ground, you are decelerating all the way up to the very top of your arc. Now, what about the impact? Well, there's an impact right there, right? Let's see. That happens to be at 95. Guess what? We take that, sharpen it, just like we did last week. The other side, sharpen that as well. Again, don't do one of these, don't go crazy, but you know, something like that. And if you go to like 103, after you've sharpened that tangent, if you're like looking at this going, it doesn't look right, that feels more organic, like in that position. You know, it's okay to make those tweaks. So break the tangent there, sharpen it. And notice when I do this, how it's like rounding out our arcs. Looks much, much nicer. Now this one's a little weird because we have a pause. It's not a very long pause, but it's a pause. And then at 116, we kind of get popped up a little bit over a single frame, which is what you're seeing right there. Oh, right there. This little pop up, it's not a whole lot, but that's actually going to be the one that will break and sharpen. So you just want to make sure you're not overshooting. Again, don't do that. Yep, just as much as you can. And then take this one. This is the moment that we impact the ball. Boom, that's where we land it. Maybe 124. I might want to shift that over a little bit more. I feel like that's more correct. Boom, lands on it. Now we're not getting into the swash and stretch yet. Remember, that's like the last thing we do. That's the icing on our cake. Now, from here to there, 129 to 145, this is also, we take this, and we sharpen both on both sides, and just sharpen that tangent and this one right here. Now, if you notice that this feels like it almost comes straight up and then over and down, check your translate X. This is likely happening to you, where you have a flat tangent and then another flat tangent. Now, you might be thinking, well, why is that bad? Well, it means that your forward momentum, if it's flat, is 0, and then it has forward momentum, and then it slows down again. So let me show you what it would look like if you wanted it to have a constant forward momentum from this leap here. You hit linear, you'll actually get a lower angle on your jump. You'll still have the hang time that you're looking for, but it won't have that feeling of like going almost straight up and then over and down. This is a more realistic arc, actually. You don't have to do that everywhere, but in certain jumps it'll actually feel more organic that way. So right here, now we're getting smashed by the ball here. So in this case, back to our translate y. Remember, this is the ball getting hit off cam, so we're going to definitely sharpen that. Also, we may actually want to mess with the tangent here as well, because this one is going to probably be a sharpened tangent because we're getting hit to the right. It's a very sharp value change. It goes from nothing to, boom, getting knocked sideways. So this is off cam at that point at 159, so nobody can see any of this other stuff anyway. It's doing its own thing off cam. Ends up back on the other side. So what do? Notice that it goes all the way back this way and then up. So here's our last few keys. Here's our little friend. So this one appears to be pretty well sharpened, actually. It's all right. And this one, like so. Now it feels like it's too much hang time like that. You might want to actually bring that up slightly. Maybe retweak this a little bit less. And actually, I think I'm going to keep this in linear just for the, so it has that forward momentum at more of a constant rate when it lands. And then the ball. So you know the drill. I'll try and do this a little faster so it isn't like watching paint dry. So it's a good idea to kind of scrub through and go, okay, where does that impact occur? Happens right there. So find the moment that it gets sent down, which is actually right here. Now this is a tricky one because you want to say to yourself, well, okay, if this is getting sent down, I need it to be sharp, which is true. The thing is, if you do this, what is this doing? This is making it go fast, and then it's going to slow down as it falls. This makes no sense. Why would you want it to slow down as it falls? So here's what you actually want to do. Think of it like terminal velocity. It's moving at its like just fastest speed constantly. So as it gets sent down, it's just going to be at constant rate. Here's the thing. It's the number of frames. So if it falls and you want it to feel fast, keep it at a constant rate as it falls, but just make it so it's a few number of frames. That'll give it that speed that you're looking for. Over to the other jumps. So here, you can basically start to see, right, like where the impacts are happening. These are any of the low points. All of these I can just go break tangents and then just fix each one. So we take this and sharpen, we go over here and sharpen, and actually, let me delete the motion trail for you so you can see, you know, how what we're modifying is actually affecting the animation. Now notice that, like, I've been sharpening tangents and things and I don't even know if the timing works yet. That's actually true. I don't know. But if you're looking at your animation before you have your tangents tweaked, you're probably going to look at it and go, this doesn't work. And it's because, well, yeah, your spacing is all crap. What Maya gives you by default is going to be terrible. So you may actually have to tweak some tangents first before you even make a rash judgment on your work. So go in there and, you know, put a little bit of extra elbow grease in those tangents, get, you know, a decent jump in there, and then look at it and go, okay, does this work? Because you know, if it looks like it's really, really off after you've made those changes, then you can easily say, okay, yeah, there's something going on here. There's something wrong. So that is basically our macro pass on laying stuff out and the tangents. So now we'll give it a play blast. We'll give it a look. Some stuff I can already tell feels a bit on the fast side, but we'll play it out, see how it looks. So of course that's not the whole animation, but Correct. Yeah, Danielle, I'm sorry, I missed your question. Yeah, to put more emphasis on the jumps, you want it to have a bit more hang time. By sharpening those impact tangents, it makes the landings of every jump, it makes those heavier and faster, so the spacing is further apart. Like, so you'll notice here, the spacing between these last two moments on the star are much further apart than at the very top. As you can see, like at the very top of that, look how close together those are. What that does is, by sharpening the tangents, it makes it so the arcs are rounder, it makes it so the hang time at the top of the arc is longer, which makes it so the impacts are more impactful. They end up being, the spacing ends up being much more broad near those impacts. Now, timing-wise, we would probably maybe go in and massage things, but for the sake of time, I want to make sure I get through the concepts of not only adding swash and stretch, but also actually adding rotation along this project as well. So, like as the star emerges into all of these jumps, I want to show you how you can actually add some rotation as well as just you know, the squash and stretch. So, with the star here, as we emerge, when you're jumping, uh, many people when they do this, they forget about the rotation on the star, and you can actually, there's a lot you can do. If you're going to jump, lean into it. Think of it this way: this is the last moment that we're on the ground. This is our first moment we're in the air. Do this: lean forward into the jump the moment you're in the air with your rotation on the star, and then when you hit the top, zero it out. This is a neutral position. And then guess what? Just before you land, just before you land. This is like something human beings do, by the way. We try to, when we're jumping, we try to put our feet out in front of us to catch our momentum. So you lean forward when you jump forward, and then when you land, you actually land with your feet a little bit further out in front of you. So you lean back on the way down. Now, for something like this, on this jump here, we might want a flip. You know, that's possible. We can add it here. It's perfectly fine. So maybe we land on this, and to add more emphasis to the breaking of that brick, maybe we want to push off with more oomph there by adding a flip. So if that's the case, I'm going to use the rotate Z in this case. Remember, rotate Z is the blue one. That's what I've been using for this guy right there. So, you know, how do we get this to work? You know, we rotate it all the way up, then it goes back down to 0. That's not good. You know, all the rest of this, if you look here, you know, we had some rotation that goes up and then down, but not a whole lot of movement really. If you wanted to, you could actually like delete all of the rotate Z off of this, but you don't necessarily have to. Let me show you a couple things you can do. If you want to change the amount of movement between any two keys, here's how you can do it. 95, let's say I'm happy with the location of the star as it lands there, but from 95 to where it lands at 112, I want to add a flip. So you might be thinking, well, then you have to, you know, rotate it. But if you do that, if you just do one of these, watch what happens. Let's say I'm happy with that. It's going to revert back to this, which is 0 again. So you'll see it rotate, and it'll do a flip, which is kind of cool. But the problem is it's going to unwind. That's not happy. It's not good. So here's what you can do. Zoom back into this. So it's maintaining this value all the way through. This is where we just landed, and if we wanted to do a flip, it's basically from this key right here to this key right there. So guess what? This guy, get out. We don't need you. Here's 112. This is where we land. So take all of these things. I want to keep all of this intact. All you have to do is rotate this and just hold shift, middle mouse drag it down until the star is back upright. Like that. What have we just done? We took the entire animation from here on, and we said, I want you to play at negative 360. So now, the ball, or star rather, lands, does a flip, and then lands, boom, like that. And the rest of the animation plays exactly the way we had it before, because remember, 360 and 0 look exactly the same. So, no big deal. So we have our flip, looks pretty cool. Star gets hit. we'll actually do a backflip, I think. I think that makes sense here because we kind of get hit from the underside. I think that might look kind of interesting. So how do we do it again? Find where does it start and where does it end. So this is the moment we get hit. That's there. Where does it end? Right there. So what are we doing with this guy? Get rid of him. Take this. Now this is the moment we land. Look at the angle of the star. Watch what I'm going to do. I'm going to move this and backflip it. So I'm revolving backwards until we hit that position again. So now we do a front flip. We jump. Boom. We get hit. Backflip. Land. Hold for 2 frames. And then we can jump off. Now when you jump off, we can go right back to just a normal lean forward, let's say. So we'll just kind of do a lean outward this way. So you get this kind of landing and then pops right off. Nice contrast there as we lean into this, and you can kind of see the star there. Basically, you can go to a neutral position, and then on the way down, just before you land, a little lean this way, and then on the landing, you can just zero this out. Like that. Maybe the star does a little dance. You know, you can land and add maybe a short hop. It's possible. Maybe it like lands and kind of pops up like that. Now, if that's the case, you know, as you hop up, here's another little trick of the trade. If you want it to have a little bit of drag, rather sort of tilt overlap to it, as it lands, tilt it the other way. Just the moment it rises, keep it neutral at the top, and then just before it lands, give it a tilt the other way. And you'll get this nice kind of like boing, up and then down. And then, of course, the ball's going to ruin its day. Now, because we modified how the ball emerges, remember when you tweak those tangents, translate y tangents, like how I tweak this affects where the ball is, right? So you have to kind of think about, when does that ball emerge? Maybe I want it to emerge a couple frames later where it hits the star, so maybe there. So the star kind of falls and then sent flying. So back to the star, because now we're reacting to the ball. So we land, and of course, we're going to add some squash to the star right there. But at this point, we might kind of rotate the star like that, so it gets hit. And we can kind of just leave that as is. Like you can rotate it the other way as well. So it kind of goes boing, and like, wah, flies off sideways. And then comes back the other side. So for the end here, you know, that's a pretty okay. And we can keep something like that. Maybe at the top of this arc, keep that zeroed, but then just before you land, if you give it just a little bit of a lean back, that's okay. But boom, like that. So then the ball's not happy, and it's like, smash the star. I'll key the star right here. And actually that will begin the squash and stretch position, but basically what I'll do is I'll key just here, and then watch what we'll do. Just because the star is getting just barely squashed by the ball. Of course, now it's not reacting. Love it when it does this. Go legacy and then back to viewport. Usually it'll, there we go. So we'll actually squash the star a little bit. So it goes from here to a little bit, and then boom. We're just going to smash the crap out of it. And we'll probably have the ball take an extra frame. Like, so I might take this key, like right here, keep that, and take this one, and just move it out one extra frame. So it takes just one extra frame to squish our friend the star. So we'll kind of, we'll go like a little bit less. And then just completely, maybe we'll do something like this. See if we can get away with that. And then over the very next frame, make it disappear. That's kind of interesting. Should be on, on. Weird. Do that one more time. Well, if it's doing that, let me see something. That might be too much, but we'll see. That cool. So now, ball rotation. Just the last bit here. Gets sent down, pops back up. Now, right here, I mean, we could add a little bit of rotation right there. Not a big deal. So on the ball, looks like it's going to be rotate Z is what I'm going to use. So pull that up, go to the area. Remember, always ask yourself, where's the ball emerging? What's the jump? And what's the landing? Boom. There's those. It's those three keys right here. So I could take this middle one. I don't need it. And you can actually just, if you want to do a 360, you can do a 360 or a 180 really. But you can take all of this animation here, because we're not affecting this. We just want to affect between these two keys. So I can take this and shift it up or down in such a way that basically we just make it so, it's either blue side or red side up. Let's say we're happy with that. Now, when the ball emerges, boom, hits that star that way and lands, and then goes after the star. So, for the rest of this, I think we're basically okay rotation-wise. I don't know if we need maybe one last rotation at the end. Let's do that. So here's our jump. There's the very top key. So we don't even have a key there. And then, of course, there's the landing on the other side. So we just take these two and go, hey, I want it to do a forward flip like that. Just a half, just a 180, really. And, I mean, we could probably even do a flip from here to there. So if you wanted to add a 180 there as well, just go to that, make it so it's now red side up. So now it does this. It jumps, does a 180, does another 180, and smashes it. And I would suggest, once you've made these changes for your rotations, it's a good idea to play last one more time just before you jump to the next phase, which is really just to finish it off, and that's adding swash and stretch. So. But notice the layering process. I want you to understand, like, you can start very broad and just slowly add complexity. I mean, I hope you understand I'm doing this very quick and dirty. It'll probably take a little bit longer to really do this right. And the last, and we'll talk more about this as the class goes along, but the last, like, 20% of animation, like, to really finish off a scene, takes like 80% of the time. It's one of those concepts that's almost frustrating, because you start to feel like, am I making any headway? And you are. It's just when it gets to the very last moments of an animation where you're trying to really polish it up, the return on investment, let's say, starts to diminish. But that's really what it takes, though, to make good animation, great animation, actually. So right now it's not too bad. Probably still some things I would go in and touch up and tweak, but not too far off. So the next phase is the squash and stretch, everybody's favorite. So, you know, look, don't just look at things as like, oh, I just need squash and stretch on the impacts and I'm good to go. Even things like this, when the star is like emerging, you know, have fun with this. Make it feel like he's getting pulled from a vortex or something from another dimension. It's probably true. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to even add some squash here. So it's like, you know, wah, and then squash, and then add a stretch just before you jump off. And you'll actually have a nice push off this way. So have it, you know, like that. And of course, just before you, you know, at the very top, you'll probably want that neutral just before you land. You know the drill, just like the bouncing ball. Stretch that, and then squash it here. And then guess what? You stretch it on the way out. You get this nice boing, push off. Generally speaking, if you're going to rotate the star, you don't want to do it with the star stretched like this. It looks really weird when it's spinning like that. So I would suggest zeroing it out to keep it so it's somewhat rounded as it flips. Just before you land, you can stretch the star like that. Squash it here. And actually, because we have a small pause, this is a great opportunity to not just squash the star, like you can squash it a little bit, but have it squash like all the way down. So it's actually like absorbing the impact, and then it gets sent like, wow, boom. And then we stretch it a little bit and rotate it to make it feel like it's contrasting. And then as it pops up, of course, zero it out. And then just before you land, this is another opportunity. We want to keep this zeroed out. And then just before we land, add a stretch. So we go here and then stretch, and then boom. We start to squash a little bit. Don't go all the way. The very next frame, remember we actually have that extra frozen moment. We're going to squash that even more. So we get the squash, super squash, then we push off, and that'll be a stretch. So a little bit of squash, a lot of squash, push off. At the top of that jump, we'll zero it out. Remember, the reason you don't squash the top of an arc is because the ball is not moving up or down at that moment. It doesn't make sense to stretch it or squash it at that point. So just before you land, a little bit of stretch. On the land, a little squash. You can stretch it there, so you get this kind of boing, pop up. Add some, no, keep it neutral at the top. Stretch just before you land. And then guess what? It's squash time. Actually, I might even bring this up like that. So we get this stretch and then boom, it gets sent. And, you know, stretch it maybe a little bit. And that's just right off cam. It's going to join us over here. And then just before it lands, add some stretch and then squash. And then if you want something to settle in really nice, like don't just squash it and have it end. Have it squash and then go like 3 or 4 frames out, add a slight stretch to it, go another 3 or 4 frames out, add a slight squash to it, and then zero it. And you'll get this kind of nice little jiggle like that. So the star's happy with himself, and then squish, get out of here. So to the ball, how do we do squash and stretch on the ball? With this, we just kind of find the extreme positions. So here, you know, there's our moment where we make contact. So I'm going to actually use the top control here. Let's see, we'll key this at 128. 129, I'm going to squash the ball a little bit. 130, even more. And then boom, send it off. And of course, at this point, just add some stretch, basically, because we're sending it straight down, like that. So when it comes back up, now you have to remember, it's not on cam, but it is in the scene. So when it comes back over here, over a single frame, it's a good idea to zero everything back out. So do that on the squash and stretch. The moment it pops up, this is a good idea to add some stretch. So keep it neutral there, but then here, maybe a little bit of stretch. And then over about 2 or 3 frames, probably 2 frames, just zero it back out. Because whenever it's rotating, you don't want it to look like a floating, football or something. Now, blue side up. So just before you land, right about there, we'll add a stretch pose. So just a little bit there. So neutral, stretch, and then here would be a squash. And then just like we did earlier with the ball, you can actually go with a little bit of a stretch there. Over here, maybe a little bit of a squash. And then neutral. And this gives you that nice boing boing. And then it jumps. So when you're leaping, here's a little note for the way a leap is different than a jump. You want the last moment the ball is on the ground or the star, you want a stretch pose, which seems kind of counterintuitive. But here's where all of your energy is created when you jump. You squash, and then you stretch before you leave the ground. This is where the energy is created that pushes you off the ground. Some people will provide the stretch while the ball is already in the air, but if you actually put the stretch the moment after you hit the squash, you'll actually have more oomph on that jump. And when you hit the top of it, top of that jump, I'll actually zero this out. Now, you can grab the main control here, if you like, and just hit the S key and do that sort of thing. You remember how we would go through to keep organized? You can grab like the whole ball. Just on these last few keys, jump through and just hit the S key. So it's just a placeholder. Now you can grab the squash and stretch controls and you'll see, you just know, okay, this is exactly where the top of that arc is. What's the next key? Boom, that's where it lands. Okay, cool. Well, guess what? I know how to squash it. Maybe on the way in. Maybe I'll stretch it, maybe aim it back slightly. So like as it falls, it does that. Lands, pushes up. So now we're leaning it into, leaning it forward. So the ball is alive. It's leading into that. Now when we land, just before we land, we lean it back and stretch it slightly. We land, we squash. A little bit of a hop here, so we're going to stretch slightly. Top, we're neutral. On the way down, we're switching to the red side, because remember that's red side's up now. So I'm going to stretch this way. We'll squash here. We're leaping again, so guess what? We go to the stretch. And then on the way down, the ball is going to stretch again, like so. And then we make contact, so we can actually squash the ball a little bit. And then actually stretch the ball a little bit here. And then over 2 or 3 frames, just squash and very, very slight stretch, and then zero it out. And for the most part, that's it's going to be a scene right there. Let's see what we have. So of course, that's a first pass on all of those things. So you would go through, this is generally what I like to do. I keep a notepad with me. And you'll notice that I have the frame marker on this Play Blast. So you can see over here what the frame number is. What I like to do is I go through my animation with a fine-tooth comb, And anything that I see that's too slow or too fast, or the poses aren't right, or it needs a flip here, a tweak there, I can actually write down, ball frame 37 needs more time, something like that. You'll start to build a sort of shorthand, and you just basically write all those things down. You make all the changes, you save your scene, and you just slowly make a pass on each of these things until you get those little problems and idiosyncrasies out of your scene, so you get the highest quality possible. Um, that's basically that is the process. Um, Sorry, question. Yeah, I think the hardest part about doing finishing touches is that your eyes get tired. Oh yes, yeah. You know what the weirdest thing is about like having that sort of animation fatigue? The greatest suggestion I have for you in that, and this is going to seem really weird, but it's actually to take a break, to stop, go do something else, probably something unrelated to animation. Um, like even if it's like watch 20 minute a 20-minute movie or something, like go on to YouTube. I know nobody would tell you to do that. Go on to social media, find a distraction. You actually need to step away to get a fresh set of eyes on something. Sometimes it's like instead of working an extra 4 hours and making your eyes bleed, it's good to go to bed early and wake up with a fresh mind the next day. Sometimes just sleeping on it is actually better. I know that seems really counterintuitive, but I can't tell you how many times I've had a scene of animation that I was really struggling with, and because I was trying to force it and make it work, the last like 8 hours of work I just end up throwing away because you're trying to make something work when it's like you're just not in the right mindset and you're blind. You just stop looking at things with a fresh eye, and sometimes that stepping away gives you the best look at what it is you're creating. One other suggestion I have is if you have the means, and there's obviously ways that you can do this with Adobe Premiere and other things, but if you go to the movie properties video track, if you have QuickTime 7 Pro, you can do this, which is the school used to provide it. I don't know what happened there, but you can actually flip and rotate it so it mirrors the entire scene. Now, if you want to look at something with a fresh perspective, this is a great way to do it, because the motion is still the motion, but it really does force your brain to see it from a different light. So if you weren't seeing something before, when you mirror it, it's fresh. It feels different, and the motion should still play. Now you'll probably have a preference. It'll probably look better the other way, but you might be like, oh yeah, actually I need more time there. Or I need a better arc on this area. How did I not see that? So sometimes that is something that I'll use to, I don't know, help a little bit at least, because yeah, I definitely fall into that camp where I get blind to the flaws, I guess. And whenever I feel that coming up, where I'm like, I don't know, what's going on. Honestly, it's not a good use of your time to fight through that. As far in my experience, there's other schools of thought on this, I know. But yeah, for me, I feel like it's better. Like sometimes I can animate better in 10 minutes than I can in 4 hours when I'm not at my best. So, if you can find those flow states where you're just like, you just can smash and you can do really, really well, it's almost better to just wait for that moment to find that moment, or don't force it. But have the discipline as well to be able to hone in on that. I'm not saying be lazy, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. But that's a very, very good question, because it speaks to a pretty common problem in not just animation, I think, but probably most art. Well, cool. Any final thoughts or questions or anything? Thank you guys for hanging out on, this is Halloween and everything. I expected almost 0 people, so thank you. I think other people have benefited from these questions too. These are much more interesting, I think, when there's participation. So awesome. Well, have fun with this one. This is a fun scene to see. See what people come up with. have a good night, and don't overdose on the Kit Kats. It's very easy to do. Not that I know. Yes, I will be sending out those links as well. That'll be in the email. I'm going to upload this stuff right now, so thank you for reminding me. Awesome. Take it easy.